is 86 years old, a gentleman by the name of Paul Stevenson, who I've had the privilege of meeting. You know, when they say never meet your heroes, well, in this case, that it was a privilege to meet him, and that, you know, saying just doesn't apply. I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to meet this very, very, very heartfelt and genuine human being. He's the man behind, or one of the people certainly, behind the Bristol bus boycott of 1964. So before my time, but he's become an iconic part of the history of that great city of Bristol. And arguably, I would say he's an iconic part of British history. And it goes beyond these borders, because the Bristol pioneers, as they are now known, stood up for their rights and fought the racist culture of the Bristol Omnibus Company, as it was known then, which refused to employ black bus conductors. And that moment, that boycott, changed the face of Britain forever. It was the equivalent of Martin Luther King's Montgomery bus boycott, which you could argue was the boycott that triggered off the whole civil rights movement, for which Martin Luther King was still fighting right up to his death about 13 years after the boycott in 1968. He was assassinated. Now, the actions of the Bristol pioneers impacted the establishment that we call Great Britain PLC, and it affected every single race relations act in the country. Do you remember them? Race Relation Acts. Well, Curiosity Unlimited is a social change organisation bringing the story of the Bristol bus boycott to places where they've never been before for the whole year of the 60th anniversary. And this time, it's a bus stop for a very special journey. Well, BBC Bristol's Primrose Granville went along and spoke to those involved and spoke to some of the pioneers, and we'll hear more from her in a moment or two. But first, this is what she's delivered for us.
My name is Jules. I'm Disrupting Chief for Curiosity Unlimited. We're thinking do tank for advancing racial, social justice here in this fair old city of Bristol, which is the 7th worst for people of colour. And we have a simple dream, and that's to flip reverse and turn Bristol into the best possible city in the UK for people of colour to live and to thrive.
What is today all about when it comes to the Bristol bus boycott?
So as you know, the Bristol bus boycott was a significant moment for race relations, not just here in the city but beyond and in Britain. So we want to recognise, celebrate, commemorate that, but we want to embed it into the iconography of the city, because as we look around our city, where our names, where our heroes, where our sheroes, and I just want to be able to see myself and also my daughters see themselves, you know, reflected in the streets that they walk on and the buildings that they work in. Today's about working with Clear Channel UK. We formed this partnership called Designs4Change. As part of that, embedding it into the iconography of the city, we are asking whether you're an animated, illustrated designer, whether you doodle, whether you draw, to contribute to this competition, this design competition, which would 3 winning designers would then go on to the bus stops across the city for a year. So you will see your work, which will empower, which will inform, which will engage, which will inspire about the Bristol bus boycott. And we think that's a really important thing to do and talk about in the 60th year of its anniversary.
You're from Clear Channel, Helen, and you're responsible for this wonderful competition that Jules just spoke about. Tell me about your role and why were you so keen to work with this group?
So we have a platform for good, and the platform for good is really about championing diversity in the people and the communities we work in. And by offering space on our screens, we hope to amplify the diverse perspectives that make Bristol the incredible community it is.
We're delighted to be, partnering with this change-making organisation, because they are actually one of the biggest out-of-home advertisers. And right now we've got this live campaign with the digital boards across the city. Now imagine, Prim, you're driving home or you're on the bus and you suddenly see the Bristol bus boycott popping up and telling its story. But actually it's not going to pop up. It's going to be here for a year. So this story will be told across our great city of Bristol, which is one of the greatest cities, but it has is unlocked potential, and this will help to celebrate one of the best stories that has come out of this city ever.
Well, BBC Bristol's Primrose Granville joins us now. Or can I call you Primrose?
Yes, you can, Dustin. You can call me Prim. Everybody does.
Well, the lady on the interview there did, so I thought if she's going to do it, I may as well do it as well. What a great story, though, Prim. This is... it's great that Bristol are doing this, although you wonder whether there is a need to retell the story of the Bristol bus boycott. I'm assuming that people in the main have forgotten about it.
Well, it's not that they've forgotten. Most people don't know about it. Most people don't know that it is this boycott that's responsible for every single race relations act that has happened in this country, because it is not a story that is told all across the country in ways that people can access it. Lots of people in Bristol don't even know the depth of the story. So the fact that Jules is doing this over a whole year, people have to pay attention.
Indeed. And what a way of doing it as well, to make sure that the story of the Bristol bus boycott is told by artists, by designers, and featuring on every single bus stop in the city. That's amazing.
It is amazing, and there's so much more. It is a one-year campaign which started last year for the 60th anniversary, and it continues into this year. And he's done 60 events, or he's going to do 60 events over the whole year. And every single one of them has a creative side to it, because the pioneers were very creative people. They had to be creative to pull off what they actually pulled off. And it's very important to not just Bristol's history, it's important to the UK's history. It's also relative to the Martin Luther King March, because the Selma Bridge March, it all ties up, and the I Have a Dream speech, it all ties up when you look at the dates, and it is really powerful, and every single child should know about this story in this country, because that's part of their history.
Indeed. I was saying that it was the comparison to the Montgomery bus boycott of Martin Luther King, which was 1955. This happens in the UK 9 years later. Was it a surprise? I seem to remember it was triggered by an Asian man, somebody of South Asian origin, applying for a job as a bus conductor and told in no uncertain terms that he was never going to get a job as a bus conductor on the Bristol Bus Company.
It was actually a young man called Guy Bailey, who was from Jamaica. He was a student at the time, and Paul Stevenson did a little ruse. He called the bus company up and actually booked the appointment for the interview, and when Guy Bailey turned up, they told him that they didn't employ coloured people. And so that's really how it was born. So Paul Stevenson and all the other people, the Roy Hackett, the Owen Henry, the Guy Baileys, there are so many of them that got involved. Children cut school to go and be a part of the bus boycott. There were lots of allies, lots of students who were at the Bristol University at the time. Some of them are still alive, who joined in and thought, no, we don't want this in our city. And a lot of the students were from Bristol, but so many people got involved that it became this huge movement. And we've made films about Selma. We've made films about the bus boycott of Montgomery. There's so many things available on the history of the bus boycott in the US. And we're watching that and seeing that all the time when we do Black history here in the US.
Yes.
But right here in our midst, there's our own history.
That's the irony, isn't it? That is the irony, that we look in horror at some of the excesses of the American civil rights campaign, the horror that was meted out against the civil rights marchers and other African Americans at the time. And yeah, there is a part of us that thinks, oh, well, that could never happen over here. That has never happened over here. Whereas, as you say, it actually did happen over here. I've had the privilege of meeting Paul Stevenson, who genuinely is probably my ultimate British hero. And he, and I'm sure the rest of the Bristol bus campaigners, as humble as he is, he doesn't take the credit for this, does he? He's a humanitarian who gives credit to everybody else in this bus campaign but himself.
But, you know, Dotun, when you meet them, I have the privilege of meeting them all. I know most of them, and I've been in most of their houses eating at some stage or another, because there are ordinary elders. I call everybody auntie and uncle. And when you meet these pioneers and you know who they are and you see how humble they are, you know, they don't walk around with chips on their shoulders. Oh, I did this and I did that. You know, we've got the Seven Saints of St. Paul's that feature quite a few of these individuals who were involved. And they're just so humble, and they're willing to share their story, and they talk to people and they talk about it because they just want to pass it on to someone else. They don't want praise. You know, they didn't want anything massive about them. Roy Hackett, the late Roy Hackett, he was one of the funniest human beings you've ever encountered. And when he told you the story of the things that they did and how they caused this change, and the buses had to take us, that's them saying, we did this, and we stand on their shoulders, and we stand in the shadow of what they did, and we actually benefit from their humility simply because they didn't share their stories because they want anything in return. All they want is to educate the generations that came after them.
And let's not forget, even though they are invariably in their 80s, the people, the campaigners who are still with us, I mentioned Paul Stevenson, 86 years old, and counting. At the time of the boycott, people can work out how old these campaigners were. They were in their 20s. You know, that's something that leaves me gobsmacked every time I think about it, is what was I doing in my 20s? I certainly wasn't changing the world in the way that they were. Were they cognizant of the impact? Because on the one hand, I can understand why people think this is a localised issue to Bristol, because that's where the campaign was occurring. That's where the bus company was deciding that they didn't want coloured people working for them. And crucially, just like the Martin Luther King campaign in Montgomery, that lasted about a year. I'm not sure how long this one lasted, but do tell us. But just crucially, they hit racism where it hurts, which is in its finances. If people boycott your bus company, you've got nobody paying into your bus company, and your bus company becomes, well, insolvent.
You know, you raised some really valid points there. It is so not local. It is so national. It is so global. Because, no, they didn't know what they were doing. They just didn't want to put up with the injustice anymore. And so they got together and they thought, well, let's see if this is really happening. They heard that it was happening, but they probably didn't believe it. And then when it happened, they're like, well, no, why shouldn't... Guy Bailey was a teenager at the time. He was a teenager. You know, why shouldn't a young man who can drive a bus go and drive a bus like anybody else? And let me tell you, unions, members of the city council backed the bus company. So they weren't fighting a bus company. They were fighting a system quite like we are today. But I don't think they understood just what they did until it actually happened. And until people started talking about it in a historical context, they just didn't get it. Like I said, they just wanted to get jobs on the buses.
Yeah.
And people...
Sorry, go on. No, you carry on, Prim.
People wanted to take the buses and see people who looked like them on the bus.
Simple as that. Okay. Is there a moment of reflection on this campaign, 60th anniversary, or is there a website or something that people who want to find out more can go and seek the information?
Well, at the moment, there are quite a few. And just to answer the question you asked earlier, the bus boycott lasted about almost 5 months. It was just over 4 months, but if you think about the little fringe areas that didn't get counted, it was 4 to 5 months. So that was quite a long time for the UK. Also, you've got Curiosity Unlimited is doing a 1-year project on it. It's a 1 year, it's not even a project, it's a 1 year, I don't even know what to call it. It's a 1 year initiative to raise awareness, not just in Bristol, but across the country. So Curiosity Unlimited, you can find them online. You can also find information about the Bristol bus boycott under the words, the Bristol bus boycott. Once you put it in, you'll see a lot of the people who are part of it. And what I like about the Curiosity Unlimited stuff is that some things don't honor all the pioneers. Some of them get forgotten in the narrative because maybe they were not seen as the front runners. But those who marched, the 14-year-old who cut school and got in trouble and marched, she's a part of it. He's sitting on that bus stop last week. It's such a powerful thing.
What a great story. Look, Prim, anytime you've got a great story from Bristol, for us, then do let us know. I'd love to hear more. I can listen to your dulcet Caribbean tones all night long.
Thank you very much. And there will be more because it's coming up to the end of the year, so there'll be more.
I hope so. For now, thank you very much for telling us about the Bristol bus boycott of 1964. And I'm sure that many people listening will remember it, and I'm sure that many people listening won't have heard of it until tonight. So good luck with the entire initiative, Bristol. Well done, you. Primrose Granville from BBC Bristol.